I was on YouTube and ran across this YouTube video titled, "I was sold to the highest bidder for my organs," and I, much like you probably are right now, was completely taken aback. It's a video of Loretta Lyon telling her story as a teenager around the age of 17. She was kidnapped by what has been described to be an organ harvesting gang. She was held captive for 6 months, and just when you think the story cannot get any worse, it does, many times. And I think that everyone should hear the story, so we're gonna talk about it. Loretta was born in Yugoslavia in the 80s, and growing up, she was a happy kid. Her parents had unfortunately struggled with having children, so when they had her, they looked at her as their little miracle. When she was a baby, her parents moved to what is now known as Serbia, and the place in which they lived was surrounded by a lot of land, farming villages, woods, mountains. Her mom was a professor, her father was a doctor, and he was the person that she looked up to the most. At the time of the story, she had decided that she had the same drive that her father did for wanting to help people, and she knew that she wanted to follow in his footsteps and study medicine as well. But the civil war in Yugoslavia and everything that came along with it would get in between that. Loretta has said that her greatest gift in life was not only the love that her parents gave her, but the love that she had for her parents and still does. And to explain the Yugoslav civil wars in very simple terms so you guys don't get confused, because this is a lot of information I'm about to throw at you, but basically, Yugoslavia, the country, was made up of a lot of different states, different groups, different ethnic groups, religion, histories, etc. They all wanted to split up, and different parts of Yugoslavia went to war with each other. This lasted years, and it was a horrible, massive war zone. That environment made it incredibly easy for criminal groups to operate because there really wasn't a stable government or really any real police protection. People were hiding, running, starving, trying to escape the country. Kidnappings were tragically common, especially of young women. Many people did not survive, and it really felt like things just kept going from bad to worse. Loretta and her family were taken away from their house by soldiers alongside of a big group of people and into the mountains, clueless as to why or what was going on. And it was her uncle who stood up to the soldiers basically to negotiate and offer everything that he had of value in exchange for the soldiers to keep them alive. And it worked because her uncle gave up basically everything that he had of value. The soldiers then left the big group of people marching up the mountain, uncertain in the dark and in the cold. Everyone was panicked, babies were crying, but Loretta and her family eventually made it back to town, realizing that their uncle's bribe had worked and they had spared them of their lives, really. He had pretty much saved the village because of what he did, and after that night, Loretta's dad knew that he had to make sure that Loretta fled. He needed her to leave the town, pack a bag, and leave the village because the soldiers were very clearly targeting young women, and he told her that if she stayed, she was not going to make it. So her mom helped her pack a bag, and off she went into the night to cross the mountain to seek help. She was young, scared, alone. When she reached the other side of the mountain, she described it as seeing no life because the streets were dark and empty. The only sign of life was coming from this little restaurant type of place, so she walked in there to ask for a glass of water and immediately broke down and started crying. Shortly after, two men, Peter and Brian, who were police officers that served for the United Nations, walked in. They saw her and they pretty much took her underneath their wing. They knew that it wasn't safe for a 17-year-old girl to be alone anywhere, and they took her, they gave her shelter, they let her stay under their roof and cared for her. And even though Loretta was terrified, she felt like she had no other option but to trust them, and she did, and they kept her safe for about a month, but unfortunately that did not last forever. One day, while Peter and Brian were out working, Loretta decided to go outside of the apartment to go and find a magazine. But as soon as she walked out, a black van drove straight to her, completely blocking her path. A group of men jumped out, one of them placing a black bag over her head, and another one grabbed her and threw her inside of the van. They closed the door and drove off. She had no idea where they were going. She was petrified, unable to see anything around her until the van eventually stopped. One of the men carried Loretta out of the van, more like dragged her out of the van and into this scary looking building. They put her in a dark, cold room where a man was waiting for her. They ripped the bag off of her head, and for the first time she was able to see her surroundings, but before she knew it, she was on her knees on the ground, a group of men staring down at her, some of them pinning her down, when one of them instructed the others to flip her over and SA her. Loretta started crying, screaming, trembling in fear, now understanding what was about to happen to her, and she yelled at them to stop, saying that she had never ever done anything with a boy or a man before. And when she made that comment, the men did stop, but not because they felt bad for her, of course not, but because knowing that, they now looked at her as being quote unquote pure, and they knew that they would be able to get a lot in exchange for her because she was pure. The man who appeared to be in charge of everyone stopped the men and said, quote, "Boys, we have stumbled across a huge cargo. We have a lot of work to do with her," end quote. Loretta would soon come to find out what that meant. For the next days, turning into weeks, the men trained her. This 17-year-old girl, they trained her on intimate acts. She was forced to watch the men do horrific things to other women and girls in order to teach her or show her rather, what certain things looked like to prepare her for her to be ready for when they gave her in exchange for valuables to the highest bidder. It's awful. You say these things out loud. It's hard to comprehend that they actually happened. Lorada has said oftentimes that she would become sick from what she had to witness. Their plan was to get her ready for the men to pay the highest value. She would then be taken, shipped away, and used, treated in every inhumane way you could possibly ever think of. And once they were done with her, once everybody was done with her, she would then be looked at as having no more value. And then they would take her organs, any vital organs that she had left, they would be taken and sold into the black market. That's what she gathered by witnessing everything that she did and hearing the conversations around her and seeing it happen to other girls firsthand. She said that they even told her what they were going to do because they had done this many times before, and she said that when they would tell her, they found it hilarious. It was comical to them talking about their plan. It was more so routine by that point. I cannot comprehend or even begin to try and understand the level of fear anyone would be in that situation. When Lorada was deemed as ready, they put her in the car to be transported to wherever they were taking her. They made the drive and they reached the border, but the border was closed. And police officers there told them that they could not cross and sent them back to wherever they came from. You can imagine the relief that Lorada felt when they were turned away from the border. When they got back to their apartment, the boss man was around and he got pulled away on a phone call. He was getting really agitated on the phone. He walked away. The other two guards standing around Lorada also got distracted for a moment, and she knew that if she got a chance to escape, it would be one chance, and that one chance was now or never. The boss directed one of the guards to get rid of Lorada, saying that she had proved to be way more trouble than what she was worth, and directed the guard to just get rid of her. But for whatever reason, thankfully, the one guard that was left with her gave her the one thing that she asked for, and what she asked for was for just a few minutes to pray. She wanted to pray. The guy allowed her to, and he set his belongings down on a nearby table and walked off to use the bathroom. One of the things that he set down on the table before walking off for a moment were his keys. And the second Lorada was left alone, she grabbed the keys off the table and she made a run for it. She kept thinking over and over again that she just had to get a hold of her parents because she wanted to be able to tell them where she was and what was about to happen to her so that they would not spend the rest of their lives wondering where she was and if she was still alive. Lorada, using the sliver of hope and strength that she had left, grabbed the keys. There were two doors in between the room that she was in and the outside, and she was moving as fast as she could but as quietly as she could so the guard wouldn't hear her trying to escape. She made her way to the first door. It was a big wooden door and she was able to get through that one door without anyone hearing her, but the second door, that one was locked, and that one was a loud, heavy metal door. She knew that she wasn't going to be able to open that one quietly, so she started to play around with the keys to try and figure out which one fit, which is when the guard, heard her, started yelling at her and running towards her, but luckily she found the key. And she pushed the door open and fell onto the street outside where she saw what looked to be a police car. She crawled on the ground when officers noticed her, but by that point the guard had also made it outside. And he had now ran out to the street chasing after her. The one guard pulled out his weapon and that was going off. The police officers also pulled out theirs as well. So Lorada was on the ground quite literally trying to crawl her way to safety without getting injured, but she managed to. One of the officers grabbed her and pulled her into his Jeep, and she made it, and they took her to the station to be questioned while other officers remained right outside of where she had just escaped from, calling all units for backup. By the time that she got to the station and she was interviewed, she was obviously still so scared and clueless of what was going to happen to her. It was now 3 a.m. And one of the officers there, a man that was close to her father's age, after the interview asked if he could give her a hug. He was in tears, fully crying from just listening to her story. She refused the hug because she was rightfully so still so scared of everyone and unsure of who she could trust. But that officer looked at her and said, quote, "Do you know you were the only survivors to ever come out of these people," end quote. He said to her, "We know what's happening in there. We know what they're doing, but we cannot bring them to justice because we have never had a witness." They told her that she was the only witness that had ever lived to tell her story, which only scared her more because that meant that she was the only witness that was still alive, and it meant that those men would come after her to get rid of her for sure. The police took Lorada back to Peter and Brian, remember the two men who had helped her out and kept her safe. They took her in for the night, fed her, gave her a blanket, and stayed up with her throughout the entire night, cared for her, until the next morning when she had to cross the mountain again and return to her family, return to her village, even though she was not safe there. She couldn't stay where she was because she knew that those men would come after her and they would get rid of her in a second. So she went back home to her family. Thankfully, her parents were still alive, and obviously everyone was so happy and relieved to see her alive, but still so scared about the fact that she had returned because their town was still so far away from being safe for anyone, let alone a young woman. Her mom actually, instead of hugging her and telling telling her that she was glad to see her, she became hysterical, crying because she was so scared for her. And she should have been, because the next thing they knew, there was a group of men, soldiers, in a massive truck pulling up right to their house to take her. And in a matter of seconds, Loretta was once again being ripped away, physically ripped away from her family. She was taken, pulled into this big military truck, leaving her parents behind her, crying out for her. She was driven into the mountain, dropped off at this building that looked to be like an abandoned building where she would be kept for the next 6 months. The treatment that she experienced there was horrible in every single shape, way, and form. She was left with trauma not only from the essay that she had to endure, but from other ways and things that were done to her. She had a broken nose. She was always 24/7 absolutely covered in injuries. Those days turned into weeks. They turned into months of her being trapped in this dim, small room in solitary confinement. And when she was there, she felt herself withering away. Her parents saw her being taken, so she no longer felt hope to stay alive for them, to be able to tell them that she was okay, to tell them that she had not abandoned them. They saw her being taken away, and they knew that she probably wasn't going to return back home, so she really felt like she had absolutely nothing left to hold on to. And she remembers that gave her a really strange feeling of closure and peace. She remembers thinking that everything that made her her was taken away from her by what she described to be men that were turned into monsters during the war. This is a quote from her, quote, "The 6 months were a profound experience for me, initially filled with resentment and hate. I mirrored their hostility until I realized it was consuming me. Despite the suffering, I refused to let them strip me of my humanity. Instead, I chose empathy, even pity, recognizing their own twisted reality. I clung to my sense of kindness, refusing to let them break my spirit or my sanity," end quote. Throughout those 6 months, what Loretta did not know was that her father was not giving up on the search for her. Her dad, with the help of a sympathetic police officers that he had known for a while, managed to figure out where she was being kept, because her dad was a doctor, remember, so he had been working with soldiers, because no matter what was going on, he was still expected to be one of the designated doctors who was helping people who were hurt. And the two of them together came up with this plan to rescue her in the middle of the night. They had to make sure that it was dark out when they went to rescue her to limit their chances of being caught. And then her dad went to go and find her. When the door opened and Loretta saw her dad and heard his voice, she could not believe it. She was so weak by that point. She could hardly even stand. All of her wounds were infected. She had broken teeth, a broken nose, I think also a broken jaw. But seeing his face was the one and only thing she needed to gather up enough strength to get out of there. Her dad covered her up, got her in the car, and drove her back to go and see her mom. When her mom saw her, she broke into tears. Both of her parents helped Loretta the entire night with her injuries. And it was only when she was lying on her mom's lap that night that she finally was able to feel a sense of safety again. After her rescue, her dad again came up with a plan to get her out of that country, because it was obvious that she was no longer safe there. Her dad, with the help of a police officer, got a truck that was being used in import-export activities. They used that truck to hide her in it and drive her away. She waved goodbye to her parents, still so scared but trusting in her dad's judgment. And with a very heavy heart, she hopped in that truck and hid inside of it until they made it all the way to the UK. It wasn't until they were actually in the UK that she came out of hiding and she was finally safe. Loretta was able to go to university, follow the dream that she always had. She became a British citizen, and 5 years after that, she was finally able to reunite with her parents again. She became a personal trainer, which was a huge turning point for her, because she found that fitness was something that really helped her be able to manage her emotions. And it makes me so happy to say that she also found love. She got married, and today she's not only a survivor, but she's also a motivational speaker, an author, a public speaker, and a lifestyle coach. The strength of this woman is literally out of this world. And I retold her story after hearing her tell it, but I think obviously it is the most impactful listening to the story in her own words, considering she survived and fortunately lived to tell her story, which often is not the case in cases like this. So I will leave the link to the YouTube video that I saw in the comments, but I want to end this video with a quote from her. Quote, "Life offers us choices. Regardless of the challenges we face, we can opt to remain victims or embrace survival and growth. Every setback is a lesson, not punishment. It's about recognizing both the good and the bad in people and situations and making choices that empower us. Starting the day positively, replacing self-criticism with affirmations, and surrounding ourselves with possibilities sets the tone for success. We cannot control how others treat us, but we can control our responses and our journey towards making a difference in the world," end quote. Tell me that's not the craziest story you have ever heard, and I'm so happy that it was a survival story. I don't even know what word would do justice to describe her. She is incredible. Sorry about the lighting throughout this video. As you can tell, the sun was setting while I was filming, which did not take me that long, but I live in the Midwest, so the sun sets in like 5 minutes at 2 p.m. Anyway, that is all I have for today's story. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Lorada's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.